Hello, hey, this is Joe Williams again. I hope that I'm gonna try to figure out a way to make sure people will actually watch any of these videos. So, as I say in a lot of my videos, I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the states of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and I've been working in the mental health profession since 2002 as an in-home psychotherapist and as a something called a TSS, a therapeutic staff support, since about 1995. I'm the son of a psychiatrist. I've had mental illness in my family, so I've always thought about mental health. Um, when I was a student at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, as a graduate student in psychology, you have to do something called a practicum. So I was kicked out of the school twice, right? So the second time I was let back in, I did my practicum at a place called Community Council for Mental Health and Mental Retardation. And they've since gotten rid of that name because, of course, mental retardation is not an acceptable term. We say intellectually disabled ID. I think it's just called community council. So I'd gone through. Oh, so first of all, I was working there and also doing my practicum there, which was a violation of the practicum rules, apparently, although they were totally different jobs. Like the my work was with children in the wrap. It's called wraparound, and the practicum was in their adult coping clinic. I don't think I don't. I well actually I'd previously done a practicum in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, and I was working with adults. But this was also one of the first time I was actually working with adults. Now, community council is a place that was already familiar to me before I worked there because uh, my brother has had significant mental health issues and he would get treated there. And then we were supposed to have like a family therapy meeting. We were supposed to have family therapy meetings there. And it was called, I believe, Catchment Area 4 before it was called Community Council. I remember my dad refused to, because he was a psychiatrist. He sort of didn't think much of psychologists or social workers, certainly, and he refused to come to the meetings. But so it was kind of funny that I ended up working there in my practicum. I wasn't technically, well, I was working there, and I was like literally in the same office where my family had gone for therapy. So anyway, one of the things I noticed working with uh, adults as opposed to children was that they, in fact, did talk about sex quite a bit. In fact, I remember they gave me an intake, right? Like this intake form. I think there was like at least like 100 questions on it. And I remember some of them really got explicit. Like there was some kind of a question about, whether or not you engage in, risky sexual behavior. And I remember it was like I was in an office where they didn't have, well, they did. I was I was sitting in this like little office. I remember that there were no windows. It was kind of in the back. I was alone with this woman, and I was asking her these questions, and she got really annoyed with the questions. And I said, "Do you engage?" I said, I apologized in advance, and I said, "I'm sorry, I have to ask these questions." And I said, "Do you engage in high risk sexual behavior?" And she said, "Do you engage in high risk sexual behavior?" "I'm sorry, ma'am." She's like, "I don't like these questions." Like, "I know, I know. I didn't write these questions. I just ask them." But then after that, there were several people who came in with, you could call them sexual issues, but it was like rape. I'm talking about like rape and incest. There was a guy who came in who was the brother of a very famous person, and I wouldn't even, you know, identify as such a person. Actually, there were a couple people who came in who had famous, allegedly famous relatives, and this guy, his brother, actually sexually assaulted him. So on the one hand, he really loved his brother, um, but he also hated him, you know. And I was really struck by the fact that um, after so many decades, like some of these people were in their 40s or 50s. This is about 2009, 2010, and they were still dealing with uh, the abuse that they endured years ago, decades ago. And then, so that was one guy. He was a really wonderful human being, and now he was raising his kids, and but still carrying around this baggage, this trauma. Then there was another woman, absolutely fascinating story. She was actually having sex with her dad. Okay, and then the twist was she enjoyed it, and she was upset because she he broke up with her. That's how she put it, if I remember, as if they were like dating. Uh, and she became jealous that he started dating an adult woman. And ever since, she'd had problems with relationship with men, her relationships with men. So that was mind blowing to me, because you would think, you know, if your father molested you or had sex with you, you would be devastated by that kind of abuse, that kind of violation of a father-daughter relationship. So it was really strange to me that she was upset because it stopped, because that was the second one. Then there was this woman who, she was homeless. She said, I remember that right next to Community Council for Mental Health and Mental Retardation, there was a hotel called the Blue Moon, right? And actually, I'd gone to private school, and the owner's son and I were friends. We played football together. And so I was very familiar with this place. So she told me that she was a prostitute, and that she met these two brothers, and that they met her in this little park that was near community council, and that they did not allow her to leave. Like, it was almost like a hostage situation. And in order for her to live with them, they had sex with her uh, all the time. And it was just a harrowing story. And there was another person who, she was Black and Italian. And that was another thing I noticed, that there were all of these. And actually, by the way, that describes me too. Like, I did my 23andMe recently, and it turns out I'm African American and also 26% Italian, which I thought was interesting, because I don't know how that happened. But she was also, apparently, there were a lot of Italian men in West Philadelphia who had um, these black, these like second families with Black women. And they would, well, anyway, I'm digressing. But this lady was really, she had, I believe, schizophrenia, but she thought that her next door neighbor was actually sending electric shock to her vagina, like, while he was at his house, and that he was, you know, uh, keeping her under surveillance and watching her shower and all this other stuff. And like, she was serious. She would bring in like stacks of evidence of, you know, these, I forgot what she said. I can't even remember what she said. Like, there were these nanobot type stuff. And then she was calling the district attorney's office. She was calling the police department. She was serious. I think I don't know. I don't remember if she called the FBI. Um, and my concern was, she was not reality based. So at PCOM, right, we had this class where we would simply talk about our problems that we're having at our practicum and issues. So I was later accused of being hypersexual because I brought these cases. It wasn't that I was interested in these cases for some prurient reason or because they were titillating or whatever. It was what it was, right? That this is what people were presenting with. And for me, they weren't sexual stories. I mean, they involve sex, sort of, but you're talking about rape and incest and, psychosis. So, and then there was another guy who, I think he was 19, and all I did was I tried to do sort of a timeline of his life. And I remember I started asking, okay, well, what happened when you were X age? What happened 5 years ago? And all of a sudden he just started shaking. And I stopped asking him questions. And then he was like, told me that he blacked out and that it was too painful to talk about these situations, talk about his life, I guess, and whatever trauma might have occurred to him. And I remember I talked to my supervisor on site there. I can't think of her name. And she said, well, what you need to do is engage in prolonged exposure. And I was like, oh, gee, what's that? I'll be happy to do that. And she's like, no, you can't do that. And it's funny because last week I just completed a prolonged exposure 4-day intensive course at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School with Dr. Edna Foa, who created it. And so now I can do it some 12 years later. Now, what is my point? Okay. So one day, I almost finished PCOM, almost graduated. Like I said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker now. So I then went on to Temple University and got an MSW. But I came in one day. I remember, I think I had like 10 days left of school or something like that. And I got this. I went in. I got all this coffee and donuts and all this other stuff. And I brought it in. I was very happy. I was like, "Wow, I'm actually going to graduate after all of this." I've been through so many things. 2007, 2008, and I was like, "Wow, I'm finally going to graduate." And the woman who was sort of the office director, she said, "Oh, why are you here?" I said, "Oh, what do you mean? I'm coming in for work." And she said, "Oh, you didn't get the email?" So then I looked at my email and it said I was under investigation. So my first thought was, well, I'm accused of insurance fraud, billing problems, something of that nature. And in fact, uh, I was never told what I was under investigation for. Never, at no point. They just told me it was founded. I mean, talk about panic and anxiety, and I was experiencing so much fear. I went from thinking that I'm gonna graduate and I'm gonna go on to be an LPC. I got my degree in a horrible way, but at least I was gonna graduate and this experience would be over. No. I went on to not only not graduating, being thrown out of the practicum. I actually resigned before they could throw me out. And I lost my job, and I lost all my jobs. It was just a nightmare. It was just an absolute nightmare, unmitigated nightmare. So I had to my uncle had just died, my Uncle Gary, and, he left me some money. I went right through all the money that it's a shame. Giving it to lawyers. So I hired this lawyer. His name was Michael Doyle. He believed whatever it was, I was probably guilty of it anyway. Um, and I mean, that's some lawyer. But anyway, uh, he found out he had to was supposedly doing this investigation. And then ended up working with her later at another agency called Warren E. Smith. That was awkward. She's a horrid person. And this other woman named Allison Mellwig. They just never even if they would have taken 5 minutes to just talk to me and ask me what's going on or what's my take on it, never bothered. No, it doesn't matter. We'll ruin his life. Who cares? That's his problem. And this is supposed to be like a social service type of mental health agency. No, no real investigations. It's all a farce. One of the things that is really mysterious is they had my supervisor, at PCOM. Her name was Dr. Marcia Singer. She came over, I believe, to community council for a second time. I don't know why. I don't know if that was unusual. And at this point, I couldn't think straight. Like, I'm under an investigation. I'm begging to ask why I'm under investigation. What's the investigation about? Can I just come in? I was banned from the premises until the investigation was resolved. One of the things that was really interesting about this too is that, they have these positions, right? I worked as what you call a behavior specialist consultant. The whole reason I went to PCOM was so that I could get a license and actually, because I had a master's degree in teaching, so I really wanted a clinical degree. And that way, I could certainly have assured uh, uh, employment, and I could really be in my field because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what I was doing. So that was why I went to PCOM. So anyway, I ended up in extraordinary amount of debt, which I'm still in, and no degree. So, okay, now so they had these positions called behavior specialist consultant and a mobile therapist. Those are two master's level people. And then they had something called a TSS, right? A therapeutic staff support. So I was working with this kid. I was the behavior specialist, and this other guy was the mobile therapist. I can't remember his name. And we had a TSS also. This child who we were working with, we'd go visit him at home. I don't think I ever went to school. I don't remember going to school. But he told the TSS that the mobile therapist took him to his house and sodomized him. Okay? It's pretty disgusting, right? The kid had already been sexually abused, had PTSD, and now he's being raped by the staff, allegedly, right? So for that investigation, I was called in. The guy apparently disappeared, the mobile therapist. He was gone as soon as he found out. In my investigation, not only was I not gone, I was accused of having sex with oh, I came to find out later by my attorney, Michael Doyle. Months later, he talked to the community council, uh, counsel lawyer that the reason why I was under investigation is because I was accused of having sex, sex with the adult sister of one of the kids I worked with. So it had nothing to do with but also that I was very hypersexual in my, uh, uh, sessions, I guess. And the fact of the matter is, there's some truth to it, right? I did talk about sex quite a bit with the adults because they were talking about sex. And by sex, I mean rape and incest and horror, like sex trafficking, kidnap, possible hostage situation, guy blacking out. I don't know if his trauma was sexual or what, because he never even described it. A guy getting raped by his brother, a woman having sex with her dad. I mean, that I guess is what they meant that I was talking about sex too much. Like, what am I supposed to talk about? The weather? That's what they were talking about. In fact, I, have become a trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapist with the kids. I went to the CARES Institute. And I also had one of the reasons why I did the prolonged exposure therapy was because I worked at WAR, Women Organized Against Rape. I didn't work there, I volunteered there. And also, I now that I have the TFCBT training, that means I can go on and to the University of Oklahoma online and take their problematic sexualized behavior training with only kids who've had trauma. I would like to take just the straight problematic sexualized behavior. So I would like to develop expertise in the area that I've been accused of engaging in. And I do think it's interesting because community council was very it's predominantly African American. So I can't say it's a racial accusation. At PCOM, I do think is that PCOM was also accused of making sexual innuendo in class, which I never did either. I never said anything sexual to anybody. So I thought that was a bit racial. I'm going to talk about that too. But yeah, so they didn't even bother. They didn't even bother to investigate. They said I interfered with the investigation. I did actually call my clients to see if they knew, because to be honest with you, I didn't even know what I was being investigated for. So I'm not even sure how interfered with the investigation. There's a particular client who I could think would make such an allegation against me. I actually ran into her a couple years later at the New Jersey State Aquarium. I just saw her and she was looking at me and pointing at me. So I'm wondering if that was her. I don't even know who or if she has an adult sister. They could have, because that's what it was about. I was accused of having sex with the adult sister of a client. It was interesting because I then went on to work for this other place called Staffmore. And this is after Jerry Sandusky. They created a law in Pennsylvania which said that you have to disclose everywhere you've ever worked and whether that you've been accused of anything sexual. So I had to disclose what happened, and the woman who hired me said that it was really interesting that they put it that way, that I had sex with the adult sister of a client, because if they would have said I had sex with a minor sister of a client or the client herself, then they would have to prosecute me. Then they would have to do a actual investigation. They couldn't just, put that out there. I mean, just the mendacity of, like, a Tasha Toomer. Like, this is a person who's actually in human resources, like, playing with people's lives, not even bothering to talk to me. I mean, that's so disgusting. And Allison Mellwig, and I remember Karen Mellwig, I think is her name. And then I remember the CEO of community council, he came and, took all my things out of my desk and then, put it all in a box and walked didn't even bother saying, "Well, let's sit down and talk about what you're accused of." No, none of that. Could care less. And then back to this guy. I remember, the mobile therapist who was accused of raping a child. I remember they brought me in, and it was like a movie or television where you see these interrogations. They turn the bright lights on me, knowing full well. I said, first of all, I've never even met the man. I've never met him. I have no idea. You guys hired him. They hired him. We were on the same team, but I'd never talked to him. I don't know him. But they wanted to pass the buck. This guy, John Owens, I think he was subsequently gotten rid of. He was no longer there or demoted or something, but he was maybe the worst uh, director I'd ever had, supervisor, whatever he's supposed to be. He's sitting there questioning me. It's very much like, he also knew that I had nothing to do with the guy. But everybody's covers themselves. Everybody has to cover themselves. So he has to pretend that, like, I know something when in fact he and the staff at community council hired the man. They knew him. I didn't know him. They did the background check. I didn't do the background check. So then they wanted to make me into some sort of criminal. But, you know, I didn't know anything. And in fact, the child actually told our colleague what happened. So I lost everything in this experience at community council, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. PCOM doesn't really care. Community council doesn't care. Nobody gives. The lawyer even didn't really help me at all. He did tell me what happened, what I was accused of. And here I am 12 years later. I'm still in debt. I'm in more debt because then I went on to get another degree. And it's just, to me, a gross injustice. It happened to me. So at the very least, I can talk about it. And I'm going to hopefully write about it. I think I should, because it's wrong, right? It wasn't fair. I didn't deserve any of it. I didn't deserve that. And so I'm going to keep posting about it and see what people think. Thank you.